Denise Washington stood up in that courtroom and did something no one expected. She laughed. Not loud, not bitter, just a soft, quiet laugh that made her ex-husband's face turn white as bone. Bradley Hartwell had just finished telling the judge she was nothing, a nobody, a woman who couldn't program a microwave. His mistress Tiffany was already smiling in the front row, adjusting her diamond bracelet. Then Judge Caldwell asked one simple question. And that question? It burned Bradley's billion-dollar empire to ashes. If you want to see satisfying justice served, subscribe to the channel and stay until the very end. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let me take you back to where it all began. 20 years. That's how long Denise Marie Washington had been invisible. She stood at the edge of the Metropolitan Museum Gala, holding a glass of sparkling water she hadn't sipped from. Around her, New York's wealthiest circled like sharks in designer suits. Laughter echoed off marble walls. Champagne flowed like tap water. And there, right in the center of it all, stood her husband, Bradley James Hartwell III. He was 50 years old, but money had a way of buying youth. His gray hair was dyed chestnut brown. His teeth were too white, too perfect. His Brioni suit cost more than most people's cars. He held a glass of vintage Krug champagne and told a story that made everyone around him laugh. Denise knew that story. She'd heard it 100 times. It was about how he built Hartwell Technologies from nothing. How he wrote the first algorithm on a napkin in a coffee shop. How his genius changed the shipping industry forever. Every word of it was a lie. But that wasn't what made Denise's chest tight tonight. It was the woman hanging on his arm. Tiffany Lane McAllister, 26 years old. Blonde hair that caught the light like spun gold. A red dress cut so low it left nothing to imagination. She laughed at Bradley's jokes before he finished telling them. She touched his chest whenever a camera flashed. She wasn't hiding anymore. None of them were. "He looks happy," a voice said beside Denise. She didn't turn. She recognized that voice. Preston Whitmore, Bradley's corporate attorney. A man with the moral compass of a hungry shark. "He looks expensive," Denise corrected softly. "There's a difference." Preston took a sip of his scotch. His eyes stayed on Bradley and Tiffany across the room. "The IPO launches in 2 weeks," he said. "Hartwell Technologies opens at $60 a share. He's going to be worth over $1 billion, Denise. On paper and in practice." "I know." Preston lowered his voice. "He's going to file. After the bell rings on Wall Street. He wants the divorce news to come after the stock price settles. He doesn't want to spook the investors." Denise felt nothing. Not anymore. "What's he offering?" she asked. "The cottage in Connecticut. $5,000 a month for 3 years. That's it." Denise finally turned to look at the lawyer. Her eyes were dark brown, intelligent, and completely calm. "That cottage needs a new roof." "I know. And I built that company." Preston's jaw tightened. He looked away. "I know that too." Across the room, Bradley whispered something into Tiffany's ear. The young woman threw her head back and laughed. It was a performance. Everything about her was a performance. Then Tiffany looked directly at Denise. She smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a woman who had already won. A smile that said, "I'm younger, I'm prettier, and soon I'll have everything you thought was yours." Denise didn't smile back. She didn't flinch. She simply watched. Her mind wasn't on the humiliation. It was on a storage facility in Newark, a fireproof safe, and a document signed 19 years ago that Bradley had been too drunk to read properly. "He thinks he owns everything," Denise said quietly. Doesn't he? Preston asked. Denise took a small sip of her water. Buildings need foundations, Preston, and foundations need signatures. She set her glass down on a passing waiter's tray and walked toward the exit. She didn't look back at her husband. She didn't look at his mistress. She had waited 20 years. She could wait a few more weeks. The divorce papers arrived 3 weeks later. They didn't come with a conversation. Bradley didn't sit her down and explain that he'd fallen out of love. He didn't apologize for the affair. He didn't even show up. Instead, a process server disguised as a flower delivery man knocked on the door of their Tribeca penthouse at 10 in the morning. Denise signed for the flowers. Inside was a manila envelope. She carried it to the kitchen island. The penthouse was silent. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Hudson River. White oak floors gleamed. Art that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime hung on the walls. Bradley loved this apartment because it felt like a showroom. Denise hated it because it felt like a museum where she wasn't allowed to touch anything. She opened the envelope. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Petitioner, Bradley James Hartwell III. Respondent, Denise Marie Washington Hartwell. She flipped to the proposed settlement. Her hands didn't shake. Bradley was offering her the Connecticut cottage, the one with a leaking roof, her 2022 Audi, $5,000 a month for 3 years. That was it. In exchange, he kept everything else. The Tribeca penthouse, worth $14 million. The Hamptons estate, worth $22 million. The Aspen ski lodge. The Ferrari. The Porsche. The vintage Jaguar collection. And 100% of Hartwell Technologies. The company she had built. The company that just went public at $64 a share. The company that made her husband worth $1.4 billion. He was offering her less than a fraction of 1%. Her phone buzzed. A text from Bradley. Don't make this hard, Kat. My lawyers are the best in the city. Take the deal. You'll be comfortable. Fight me, and I'll drain you dry. I'll make sure you end up back in Oakland, where you belong. Denise stared at the phone. Oakland, where you belong. She thought about her father. A mechanic who worked double shifts so she could have books. Her mother. A nurse who never missed a single school play. They had raised her to be proud, to be strong, to never let anyone make her feel small. And for 20 years, she had let Bradley make her invisible. She had written his code, managed his calendar, raised his son, smiled at his parties, stood in his shadow. And now he was throwing her away like an old piece of furniture. Denise did something she hadn't done in a long time. She laughed. It started small, a chuckle. Then it grew. She laughed until her eyes watered. She laughed until her stomach hurt. She wasn't laughing because it was funny. She was laughing because Bradley Hartwell had just made the biggest mistake of his life. And he didn't even know it. Denise walked to her study. It was a small room Bradley rarely entered. He called it her hobby room, as if her 3 degrees and her PhD from Stanford were hobbies. She unlocked the bottom drawer of her desk. Inside was a burner phone she had purchased a month ago. She dialed a number from memory. Law offices of Bishop and Associates. I need to speak with Marcus Bishop. Mr. Bishop is in court today. May I take a message? Tell him Denise Washington is calling. Tell him the silent partner is awake. Silence on the other end. Then, please hold. 10 seconds later, a deep voice came through. Marcus Jerome Bishop was 62 years old and a legend in New York legal circles. He didn't handle divorces. He handled corporate executions. He was the man you called when you wanted to burn a company to the ground and salt the earth. He was also Denise's mentor from MIT, the man who had told her 20 years ago that she was too smart to play small. Denise!
He finally did it?
Filed this morning. He's offering me the Connecticut shack. Predictable. Did he list the company as marital property? No, premarital separate property. He claims he invented the core algorithm before we met. Marcus laughed. It was a low, rumbling sound. That boy couldn't code his way out of a paper bag. Does he know about the LLC? He doesn't even remember it exists. And the patent filing? In my name. Always has been. Good. Here's what we do. We don't respond immediately. Let him think you're crying in a corner. Let him parade that girl around town. Let him feel so safe that he testifies under oath that he built everything himself. He will, Denise said. His ego won't let him say anything else. Then we wait for the deposition. When he commits to the lie in front of a judge, we pull the floor out from under him. Denise looked out the window. The Hudson River was gray and churning below. Marcus, I don't want his money.
I know what you want, Denise. I want him to say it. In front of the cameras. In front of his mistress. In front of God. I want him to declare that I am nothing. And then I want to show the world what nothing built. Then we go to trial, Marcus said. We let him hit you. We let him humiliate you. And when he thinks he's won, we end him. Thank you, Marcus. Don't thank me yet. This is going to get ugly before it gets beautiful. Denise hung up the phone. She walked back to the living room and stood at the window. Somewhere out there, Bradley was probably celebrating with Tiffany, ordering champagne, making plans. He had no idea what was coming. 20 years of silence was about to speak. That evening, Bradley came home to pack his bags. He wasn't alone. Not really. Tiffany was waiting downstairs in his Maybach, but he was on FaceTime with her as he walked through the apartment. Yeah, babe, I'm grabbing the watches now. The Patek Philippe collection. No, she's not here. Probably crying to her mother back in Oakland. He laughed. He threw his suits into a Louis Vuitton duffel bag. He grabbed his watches from the closet safe. He didn't even look at the wedding photos on the dresser. When he walked into the living room, he stopped. Denise was sitting on the couch, reading a book. She looked up at him, calmly. I'm leaving, Bradley announced. He puffed out his chest, the way he always did when he felt challenged. I can see that. Did you read the papers? I skimmed them. Bradley sneered. You should sign them. Tiffany and I are looking at properties in Monaco. We need this done quickly. Don't be difficult, Denise. You were always difficult. Dead weight on my ambition. Denise closed her book. She stood up. She was shorter than him by several inches, but something about the way she stood made Bradley take a half step back. Bradley, she said softly, do you remember who named the company? He blinked. What? The company, Hartwell Technologies. Do you remember who named it? I did. It's my name, Hartwell, obviously. No. Denise's voice was patient, like a teacher explaining something to a slow child. You wanted to call it Logitech Pro. I told you Hartwell sounded like old money, like something people could trust. I told you it sounded like a legacy. So you named it. Big deal. I built it. Did you? Bradley's face reddened. I made it what it is. I closed the deals. I shook the hands. I put my face on every magazine cover. The face, Denise repeated. Yes. You were always very good at being the face. She picked up her book and turned toward the hallway. Where are you going? Bradley demanded. To bed. You should hurry. Tiffany doesn't like to wait. That's it? You're not going to fight? Not going to cry? Denise paused at the doorway. She looked back at him. Her eyes were steady, calm, almost pitying. "Goodbye, Bradley." She walked away. Bradley stood there for a long moment. Something cold moved through his chest. Something he hadn't felt in years. It took him a moment to recognize it. Fear. He shook it off, grabbed his bag, headed for the elevator. Denise was nothing. She had always been nothing. A background character in his story. A placeholder until someone better came along. He stepped into the Maybach. Tiffany immediately leaned over to kiss him. "Did she cry?" Tiffany asked eagerly. "No, she just sat there like a zombie. I told you she was boring." Tiffany giggled. "Poor thing. She has no idea what she's losing." Bradley looked up at the penthouse windows. For just a moment, he thought he saw Denise standing there, watching. But that was ridiculous. She was nothing, and nothing couldn't hurt him. Upstairs, Denise stood at the window and watched the Maybach pull away from the building. She watched Tiffany lean over to kiss Bradley. She watched them drive off into the night. Then she walked to her study. She opened her laptop. She pulled up a folder labeled 1999 Foundation. Inside were documents, contracts, patent filings, incorporation papers, and one file she had never shown anyone. The original code for the logistics algorithm. The code that was now worth over $1 billion. The code that had a comment buried in line 4512. Property of D. Washington. Written while B is passed out at O'Malley's. If this code is running, I hope it's paying the rent. Denise, November 12th, 1999. She smiled. It was not a kind smile. Bradley Hartwell had built his empire on a foundation he didn't own. And foundations, as any engineer knows, are everything. The next 3 months were a masterpiece of patience. Bradley lived like a man who had already won everything. The IPO was a massive success. Hartwell Technology stock soared. Business magazines put his face on their covers. The visionary bachelor, they called him. The self-made billionaire. He bought a yacht. He named it the Tiffany. He painted her name across the stern in gold letters. He gave interviews where he talked about his genius, his sacrifice, his lonely nights coding in a basement. Denise read every article. She saved every one. Meanwhile, Bradley's lawyers buried her in paperwork. They demanded receipts from 20 years ago. They questioned whether she had contributed anything to the household. They tried to argue that her PhD was worthless because she hadn't worked outside the home in 15 years. It was psychological warfare. They wanted her to break, to scream, to beg. Denise showed up to every deposition. She wore simple gray suits. She answered questions with yes, no, or I don't recall. She gave them nothing. Bradley took her silence for weakness. "She's broken," he told Tiffany over lobster at Le Bernardin. "She knows she can't win. Next week will be a formality. We'll crush her. And then we're free." Tiffany sipped her champagne. "Wear the navy suit. It makes you look powerful. I want the sketch artist to capture your good side when you win." Bradley laughed. He reached across the table and took her hand. "After this is over, we're going to Monaco, then Paris, then wherever you want. The world is ours, baby." Tiffany smiled. She didn't know that 3,000 miles away, in a Brooklyn apartment, Denise Washington was organizing 20 years of evidence into neat files. She didn't know that Marcus Bishop had already subpoenaed the original hard drive from 1999. She didn't know that the foundation Bradley stood on was made of paper. And paper
burns.
The morning of the trial, the steps of the New York State Supreme Court were swarming with cameras. Bradley had leaked the date to the press. He wanted an audience for his victory. He arrived in a black Escalade. He stepped out like a movie star at a premiere. Navy Tom Ford suit, silk tie, cufflinks that cost more than most people's rent. Tiffany was with him, despite his lawyer's advice. She wore a white dress that looked suspiciously like a wedding gown, cut to cocktail length. She held Bradley's hand and waved to the cameras like they were already royalty. "Mr. Hartwell, Mr. Hartwell, is it true you're offering your ex-wife nothing?" Bradley flashed his campaign poster smile. "I believe in fairness, but I also believe you keep what you build. I built this company. The courts will recognize that." 10 minutes later, a yellow taxi pulled up to the curb. Denise stepped out. She wore a charcoal suit and low heels. Her locks were pulled back in a simple bun. She carried one leather bag. No one took her picture. She didn't expect them to. Marcus Bishop walked beside her, looking like a bulldog in a rumpled trench coat. "You ready?" he asked quietly. Denise looked up at the courthouse doors. "I've been ready for 20 years. They walked inside. Courtroom 314 was packed. Journalists filled the gallery. Bradley's supporters sat behind him, a collection of junior executives and sycophants who wanted to see the boss destroy his enemy. Tiffany sat in the front row, directly behind Bradley. She crossed her legs and placed her designer handbag on the bench like she was claiming territory. When Denise walked in, Tiffany let out a loud, theatrical sigh. "All rise." Judge Ruth Elena Caldwell entered. She was 68 years old, with silver hair and glasses that made her look like a disapproving grandmother. She had a reputation for hating time-wasters and liars in equal measure. She sat down, opened the file, looked at both tables. "This is Hartwell versus Washington Hartwell. Mr. Whitmore, you're for the petitioner. Mr. Bishop, you're for the respondent." "Ready, Your Honor," Preston said smoothly. "Ready, Your Honor," Marcus replied. "Opening statements." Preston Whitmore stood. He buttoned his jacket and turned to face the room like it was his stage. "Your Honor, this case is simple. It's about ambition versus apathy. It's about a man who worked 18-hour days for 20 years to build Hartwell Technologies into a global powerhouse. A man who sacrificed everything to change an industry." He pointed at Denise. "And it's about a woman who enjoyed the fruits of that labor without planting a single seed." Tiffany nodded vigorously from the gallery. "Denise Washington Hartwell has not been employed since 1999. She contributed zero capital to the business. She has no technical background. She was a housewife." Preston paused for effect. While there is dignity in that role, it does not entitle her to half of a billion-dollar empire she did not build. He sat down, looking satisfied. Marcus Bishop stood slowly. He didn't pace. He didn't raise his voice. He simply leaned on the table and looked at the judge. "Your Honor, Mr. Hartwell is indeed a great salesman. No one disputes that. He has sold the world a story. He has sold the investors a story. And now he is trying to sell this court a story." He looked at Bradley. "The evidence will show that the foundation of Hartwell Technologies is not Bradley Hartwell's ambition. It is Denise Washington's intellect." The courtroom stirred. "We will prove," Marcus continued, "that the petitioner is not the architect of this fortune. He is merely the tenant of a house his wife built. And when the lease expires, tenants have to leave." Bradley rolled his eyes. He whispered something to Preston. Preston chuckled. They weren't worried. Not yet. "Call your first witness," Judge Caldwell ordered. Preston stood. "The petitioner calls Bradley James Hartwell III." Bradley walked to the witness stand like a man walking onto a stage.
He raised his right hand. He swore to tell the truth. Then he sat down and began the performance of his life. Preston walked him through the easy questions. His name, his occupation, the success of the IPO, the genius of his vision. Mr. Hartwell, let's talk about the beginning. Who created the proprietary algorithm that Hartwell Technologies uses to optimize global shipping? I did. Bradley's voice was confident, smooth. It came to me in a dream back in '99. I woke up, grabbed a notepad, and sketched out the logic. Spent the next 6 months coding it myself in our basement. Did your wife assist with this coding? Bradley laughed. It was a rich, condescending sound. Denise? No. Denise is a wonderful woman in her own way, but she struggles with technology. She couldn't program a microwave. In the gallery, Tiffany giggled. So, to be clear, Preston pressed, you are the sole creator of the intellectual property that powers Hartwell Technologies. 100%. I built this from the ground up, brick by brick. Preston nodded and sat down. He looked at Marcus with a challenging smile. Your turn, old man. Marcus Bishop stood. He picked up a single folder. He walked slowly toward the witness stand. Mr. Hartwell, congratulations on the IPO. Truly impressive numbers. Thank you. Bradley adjusted his cufflinks. The market rewards excellence. Indeed. You just testified that you wrote the code yourself, in 1999, in a basement. Is that correct? That's correct. And you stated my client has no technical literacy? Also correct. She's lovely, but she's not technical. Marcus nodded slowly. He opened his folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. I have here a copy of your college transcript from Dartmouth, dated 1996. Can you read your grade and Introduction to Computer Science for the court? Bradley's smile flickered. I don't recall. It says F. You failed the course, and you dropped out of the retake. Bradley's jaw tightened. College isn't the real world. Bill Gates dropped out. I taught myself. Of course, self-taught. Very admirable. Marcus pulled out another document. Now, you also testified that you formed the company yourself, handled all the filings. Yes, in Delaware, 2005. 2005. But the company was operating before that, wasn't it? You were taking contracts in 2002, 2003. Under what entity? Bradley hesitated. He looked at Preston. Preston's face had gone pale. We were just doing business. Sole proprietorship. Just me. A sole proprietorship, Marcus repeated. But a sole proprietorship can't cash a $3 million check from Titan Freight Corporation, Mr. Hartwell. That requires a corporate bank account, a tax ID number. Bradley shifted in his seat. My accountants handle the details. I focused on the big picture. The big picture, of course. Marcus turned to the judge. Your Honor, I'd like to enter Exhibit A into evidence. He handed a document to the bailiff. The bailiff handed it to the judge. A copy went to Preston Whitmore. Preston looked at it. All the color drained from his face. Mr. Hartwell, Marcus said, his voice dropping to something cold and sharp. Please look at Exhibit A. This is the original contract with Titan Freight Corporation from 2003. $3 million. Can you read the name of the service provider listed at the top of page 1? Bradley squinted at the paper. His hand trembled slightly. It says, Washington Logistics Solutions, LLC. Washington Logistics Solutions. Not Hartwell. Washington. And who signed this contract on behalf of Washington Logistics Solutions? Bradley's eyes moved down to the signature line. He stopped breathing. It wasn't his signature. It was a neat, precise cursive. A signature he hadn't seen in years. A signature he had forgotten existed. It appears to be Denise's signature. Denise's signature, Marcus repeated, his voice booming through the silent courtroom.
And why would your wife, who struggles to program a microwave, be signing the primary contract for your company 3 years before you claim you started it? I must have been traveling. I told her to sign it for me. It was administrative. Administrative? Mr. Hartwell, are you aware that signing a contract as an officer of a company you don't legally represent is fraud? I owned the company, Bradley's voice cracked. It didn't matter who signed. It was my company. She was just the wife. Was she? Marcus turned to face the gallery. Or was she the owner? Objection! Preston leaped to his feet. Argumentative! Overruled. Judge Caldwell was staring at the document. Her eyes were sharp behind her glasses. I want to see where this goes. Marcus smiled. It was not a kind smile. No further questions. For now. Bradley stumbled back to his seat. His hands were shaking. He grabbed Preston's arm. What the hell is happening? Preston was already texting furiously. Sweat beaded on his forehead. I don't know, Bradley. But whatever it is, it's bad. In the front row, Tiffany had stopped smiling. She was looking at Bradley with a new expression. It wasn't adoration. It was calculation. She was doing math in her head, and the numbers weren't adding up. Judge Caldwell banged her gavel. Court is in recess until 1:30 p.m. As the room cleared, Bradley grabbed Denise's arm as she tried to pass. What are you doing? He hissed. You're going to embarrass us both. Just take the money and disappear. Denise looked at his hand on her arm. Then she looked up at his face. Her eyes were calm, patient, almost pitying. I'm not embarrassed, Bradley, she said quietly. I'm just getting started. She pulled her arm free. She walked out through the heavy oak doors. Bradley watched her go. The knot of fear in his stomach grew tighter. Tiffany walked up to him, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Bradley, why is she so confident? You said she was stupid. Bradley stared at the doors Denise had disappeared through. For the first time in 20 years, he realized he had no idea who his wife really was. And that terrified him more than anything. The lunch recess was supposed to last 90 minutes. For Bradley Hartwell, it felt like 90 seconds. He sat at a corner table at Le Cuckoo, one of the most expensive French restaurants in Manhattan, but he couldn't taste the food. His steak sat untouched. His wine glass was already empty for the 3rd time. Tiffany sat across from him, scrolling through her phone with increasing agitation. Bradley! He didn't respond. Bradley! He looked up. His eyes were bloodshot. His perfect hair was starting to come undone. What? Tiffany turned her phone toward him. Twitter is calling you a fraud. The Wall Street Journal just posted a live blog of the trial. They're talking about the signature. They're asking who really owns the company. They don't know anything. Bradley grabbed the wine bottle and poured himself another glass. It's a technicality. She signed one paper 20 years ago. It means nothing. Preston Whitmore sat at the end of the table, nursing a club soda and a migraine. He hadn't touched his food either. Actually, Bradley, it might mean everything. Bradley's head snapped toward his lawyer. Explain. Preston rubbed his temples. In intellectual property law, documentation is everything.
If Denise can prove she owns the underlying IP, if she can prove that Washington Logistics Solutions was never properly dissolved or merged into Hartwell Technologies, then, legally speaking, your company has been licensing its core product from her for 20 years. Licensing? It's my company. My name is on the building. Your name is on the building, but whose name is on the patent? Bradley's face went white. He had never checked. He had assumed. For 20 years, he had assumed. The patent is in the company's name, Bradley said slowly. It has to be. Preston shook his head. I pulled the filing this morning. The original patent for the logistics algorithm was filed in 1999. It's registered to Washington Logistics Solutions, LLC. Sole proprietor, Denise Marie Washington. The restaurant seemed to spin around Bradley. That can't be right. I built that algorithm. I wrote it myself. Did you? Preston asked quietly. Of course I did. But even as the words left his mouth, Bradley felt something cold crawl up his spine. A memory he had buried for 2 decades. Late nights in that basement apartment in Queens. Denise hunched over a glowing computer screen, code scrolling across the monitor. Him, passed out on the couch with a bottle of cheap whiskey. Her voice, soft and patient. Go to sleep, Bradley. I'll finish this. He had always told himself she was just helping, just typing what he dictated, just following his vision. But now, sitting in this restaurant with his billion-dollar empire crumbling around him, Bradley Hartwell wondered for the first time if any of that was true. Tiffany's voice cut through his thoughts. Bradley, does this mean the money isn't yours? He looked at his mistress. For the first time since he'd met her, he didn't see adoration in her eyes. He saw calculation. He saw a woman measuring the distance to the exit. The money is mine, Bradley said firmly. I earned it. I built the brand. I made the deals. Without me, that code would still be sitting in a basement, collecting dust. But without the code, Preston said quietly, your brand is just a logo and a mailing list. Bradley slammed his fist on the table. The wine glasses rattled. Other diners turned to stare. Fix this, he hissed at Preston. That's what I pay you for. Fix it. Preston met his eyes. I don't know if I can, Bradley. If Tobias has what I think he has, you're not fighting for half your money anymore. You're fighting to stay out of prison. Prison? You testified under oath that you created the algorithm. If that's provably false, it's perjury. You signed SEC documents claiming sole ownership of the IP. If that's provably false, it's securities fraud. The IPO alone could trigger a federal investigation. Bradley's face went gray. I didn't know, he whispered. I didn't know she owned anything. I thought... You thought what? Preston asked. That your wife was just decoration? That she was sitting around doing nothing for 20 years while you became a billionaire? Bradley didn't answer. He couldn't, because that was exactly what he had thought. Tiffany stood up abruptly. Her chair scraped against the floor. Where are you going? Bradley demanded. The bathroom. She grabbed her purse. I need to think. She walked away without looking back. Bradley watched her go. Something told him she wasn't coming back. Across town, in a small conference room at the courthouse, Denise Washington ate a turkey sandwich and reviewed her notes. Marcus Bishop sat across from her, looking more energized than he had in years. He's rattled, Marcus said, grinning. Did you see his face when I showed him the contract? I saw. He had no idea. 20 years married to you, and he had no idea what you built. Denise set down her sandwich. He never asked, Marcus. Not once. He never asked where the code came from. He never asked how the company was structured. He just assumed it was his because he wanted it to be his. Well, he's about to learn the truth. Not yet. Denise's voice was sharp. We're not done. I need him to commit. I need him to say it again, under oath, with no room for excuses. I need him to declare to the world that I contributed nothing. Marcus nodded slowly. And then? And then I show them everything. You know this is going to get ugly. The press will tear him apart. The shareholders will sue. He might actually go to prison. Denise was quiet for a long moment. Do you think I'm being cruel? She asked finally. Marcus leaned back in his chair. I think you're being fair. There's a difference. He tried to take everything from you, not just the money, your reputation, your dignity, your history. He wanted to erase you completely. He wanted the world to believe you were nothing. I was nothing to him. No, Denise, you were everything to that company. He just convinced himself otherwise, because it was easier than admitting the truth. Denise looked out the window. The city stretched below, steel and glass and millions of people living their lives. My father used to say something, she said quietly. He said, "Baby girl, don't let anybody write you out of your own story." For 20 years, I let Bradley write me out. I stood in the background. I let him take the credit. I told myself it didn't matter, as long as we were a family. She turned back to Marcus. But we were never a family, Marcus. I was just useful. And when I stopped being useful, he threw me away. So what do you want? Denise's eyes were steady, calm, but beneath the calm was something harder than steel. I want my name back. I want my son to know the truth. And I want Bradley Hartwell to stand in that courtroom and admit, in front of the whole world, exactly who built his empire. Marcus smiled. Then let's go take it back. Court resumed at 1:30 p.m. Bradley walked in looking like a man who had aged 10 years over lunch. His tie was slightly crooked. His hands wouldn't stop fidgeting. Tiffany was still in the front row, but she had moved. She was sitting at the end now, closer to the aisle, closer to the exit. Judge Caldwell took her seat and surveyed the room. Mr. Bishop, you may call your next witness. Marcus stood. The respondent calls Dr. Denise Marie Washington Hartwell. A murmur went through the gallery. Doctor. Bradley's head snapped up. He stared at Denise as she walked to the witness stand. Doctor? She had a PhD. He knew that. He had always known that. But he had never used the title. He had never thought of her that way. She was just Denise. Just his wife. Just the woman who made dinner and organized his calendar. Denise took the oath and sat down. Marcus approached slowly. Dr. Washington Hartwell, can you please state your educational background for the court? I hold a bachelor's degree in mathematics from the University of Chicago, a master's degree in computer science from MIT, and a PhD from Stanford in machine learning and algorithmic efficiency. The gallery stirred. When did you complete your PhD? I finished my dissertation in 2000. I didn't walk at graduation because I was 8 months pregnant with our son, Julian. Bradley felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had made her skip her own graduation ceremony. He had told her it wasn't important, that the baby was more important, that they needed her at home. She had agreed. She had always agreed. Now, Dr. Washington Hartwell, let's talk about 1999, the year, according to your husband, that he invented the algorithm that powers Hartwell Technologies. Can you tell the court what actually happened? Denise folded her hands in her lap. Bradley has never written a line of functional code in his life. Objection shot up Preston before he could think. Speculation. Opinion. I can prove it, Denise said calmly. Judge Caldwell held up a hand. I'll allow it. Continue, Dr. Washington Hartwell. Denise looked at Bradley. For a moment, their eyes met. He expected anger, hatred, triumph. Instead, he saw something worse. Pity. In 1999, Denise continued, Bradley and I were living in a basement apartment in Queens. He was working as a sales rep for a logistics company. He was good at his job, very good. He could sell anything to anyone. But he hated working for someone else. He wanted to start his own company. And what was the problem? The problem was that Bradley didn't know how to build anything. He had ideas, lots of ideas. But ideas don't become products without someone to build them. And who built them? I did.
The gallery exploded. Voices, cameras, movement. Judge Caldwell banged her gavel. Order! Order in this courtroom! When the noise subsided, Marcus continued. You wrote the algorithm? I wrote everything. The original logistics optimization code, the tracking systems, the efficiency protocols. I wrote it all while Bradley was at work or asleep or at the bar with his friends. I would stay up until 4 a.m, coding on our shared desktop computer. Bradley would wake up in the afternoon and ask what was for breakfast. Did he know you were doing this? Denise paused. He knew I was helping. That's how he described it. Denise is helping me with the technical stuff. But he never understood what that meant. He never looked at the code. He couldn't have read it if he tried. And the company? Washington Logistics Solutions, LLC? I formed it in November 1999. I put it in my name because Bradley had credit problems. He had defaulted on student loans. He couldn't open a business bank account. So I did it. I signed the papers. I set up the structure. I held the patent. Did you ever transfer any of this to your husband? No. I gave him verbal permission to use the code, to use the company structure, to build something with it. I thought we were partners. I thought we were building a life together. What happened? Denise's voice softened. Success happened. The company grew. Bradley got better and better at being the face, at shaking hands, at closing deals. And the bigger the company got, the more he pushed me into the background. Why did you allow this? Denise was quiet for a long moment. Because I loved him. Because I believed him when he said I wasn't good at public speaking. Because I believed him when he said the board meetings were too stressful for me. Because I believed him when he said I should focus on our son and let him handle the business. Do you still believe those things? No. Denise's voice was firm. I believe I was manipulated by a man who needed my brain but was ashamed of my presence. I believe I spent 20 years being erased from my own company. And I believe it's time for the truth. Marcus walked back to his table and picked up a laptop. Your Honor, I would like to enter Exhibit B into evidence. The screen flickered to life. Green text on a black background. Dense, complex code. This is a forensic copy of the original hard drive from the Washington Hartwell residence, dated December 1999. This is the source code for the logistics algorithm, the code that Hartwell Technologies has used for 20 years, the code that just went public at $64 a share. Bradley's breathing grew shallow. Dr. Washington Hartwell, can you authenticate this code? Yes, I wrote it. How can you be certain? Denise smiled. It was a small, sad smile. Scroll to line 4512. Marcus scrolled. The courtroom was silent. And then, there it was. A single line of gray text. A comment buried in the middle of a complex mathematical function. Property of D. Washington, written while B is passed out at O'Malley's pub. If this code is running, I hope it's paying the rent. Denise, November 12th, 1999. The courtroom erupted. Laughter. Gasps. Journalists typing furiously on their phones. Tiffany's mouth fell open. Bradley's face turned the color of ash. Order! Judge Caldwell banged her gavel repeatedly. Order! When the noise finally died down,
The judge removed her glasses and cleaned them slowly. The silence stretched unbearably. "Mr. Hartwell," the judge said finally, "you testified under oath this morning that you wrote this code yourself. You testified that your wife has no technical background. You testified that she couldn't program a microwave." Bradley said nothing. His lawyer grabbed his arm, said something urgent in his ear. "Mr.
Hartwell, I'm going to ask you one more time. Who wrote the code that powers Hartwell Technologies?" Bradley looked at his lawyer. Preston shook his head slightly. I need to consult with my attorney, Your Honor." "You can consult with your attorney after you answer the question. Did you write this code?" Bradley's mouth opened, closed, opened again. The whole world was watching. His investors, his board, his shareholders, his mistress, his wife. The woman he had called worthless. The woman he had tried to erase. The woman who was sitting 10 feet away with 20 years of truth in her hands. Bradley's voice cracked. "I may have had some assistance." "Some assistance," the judge repeated. "From whom?" Bradley looked at Denise. For the first time in their marriage, he saw her clearly. Not as background noise, not as a placeholder, not as a stepping stone to someone younger and prettier. He saw the woman who had stayed up until 4 in the morning writing code while he slept off hangovers. The woman who had given up her career so he could build his. The woman who had raised his son and managed his life and asked for nothing in return. The woman he had betrayed. "From my wife," Bradley said quietly. "From Denise." The courtroom exploded again, but Denise didn't react. She sat perfectly still. Her face betrayed nothing. This was only the beginning. Judge Caldwell banged her gavel until silence returned. "Given the evidence presented, I am issuing an immediate injunction. All assets of Hartwell Technologies, including funds from the recent IPO, are frozen pending a complete forensic audit of intellectual property ownership." "Frozen?" The word came from the gallery. Tiffany. She was standing. Her designer composure was cracking. "What do you mean, frozen? What about the yacht? What about Monaco?" "Ma'am, sit down," the bailiff warned. "You said it was yours," Tiffany screamed at Bradley. "You said she was nothing. You said she couldn't even—" "Remove that woman from my courtroom," Judge Caldwell ordered. 2 bailiffs moved toward Tiffany. She grabbed her purse and backed toward the aisle. "Don't touch me. I'm leaving." She pointed at Bradley. "This is over. We're done. Call me when you're a billionaire again, which is never." She turned and stormed out. Bradley watched her go. He didn't call after her. He didn't move. He just sat there, in the ruins of everything he thought he owned, while his wife walked past him toward the exit. She paused next to his chair. "You asked me this morning if I was going to fight," she said quietly. "I told you I was just getting started." She walked out of the courtroom. Bradley buried his face in his hands. 20 years of lies. 1 line of code. Everything gone. That night, Denise sat alone in her Brooklyn apartment. The city lights flickered through the window. Her phone was blowing up with interview requests. CNN, MS, NBC, The New York Times. Everyone wanted to talk to the woman who had just exposed one of the biggest corporate frauds in recent history. She ignored them all. Instead, she called her son. "Mom," Julian's voice was warm, worried. "I saw the news. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, baby. Better than fine." "Dad's all over Twitter. They're calling him a fraud." "I know." "Did you really write all that code? The whole algorithm?" "Every line."
Julian was quiet for a moment. Why didn't you ever tell me? Denise closed her eyes. Because I wanted you to love your father. Because I thought the truth would hurt you. Because I spent so long being invisible that I forgot I had a voice. Mom? I'm sorry, Julian. I should have told you. I should have told you who I was, what I built. I let him write me out of our family story, and that wasn't fair to either of us. You have nothing to apologize for. Julian's voice was fierce. You're amazing. You're the smartest person I know, and I'm proud of you. Denise felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you, baby. What happens now? Denise looked out at the city. Now I take back what's mine. She hung up the phone. She walked to her laptop. She opened the folder labeled Endgame. Inside were documents that would end Bradley Hartwell's career forever. The SEC filings with false ownership claims. The board meeting minutes where he took credit for her work. The emails where he dismissed her contributions as just typing. 20 years of evidence. 20 years of proof. Tomorrow, she would give it all to Marcus. Tomorrow, the final phase would begin. But tonight, Denise Washington allowed herself one small moment of peace. She had waited 20 years. The wait was almost over. The news hit Wall Street like a bomb at 6:47 a.m. Trading hadn't even opened yet, but the damage was already done. CNBC ran the headline across every screen. Hartwell Technologies fraud scandal. Founder's wife claims true ownership. By 9:30 a.m., when the opening bell rang, Hartwell Technologies stock was in free fall. It opened at $32. By noon, it had dropped to $18. By close of business, it was hovering at $11.43. Bradley Hartwell had lost over $1 billion in 6 hours. He sat alone in the Tribeca penthouse that was no longer really his. The furniture was still there. The art was still on the walls. But everything felt hollow now, like a movie set after the cameras stopped rolling. His phone had been ringing all morning. Board members, investors, lawyers, journalists. He had stopped answering hours ago. The only call he was waiting for never came. Tiffany had blocked his number. He found out when he tried to call her for the 20th time and got an automated message. The number you are trying to reach is no longer in service. She hadn't even had the decency to tell him herself. Bradley walked to the bar and poured himself a scotch. His hands were shaking so badly that he spilled half of it on the counter. 20 years. 20 years of work, of deals, of magazine covers and television interviews and award ceremonies. All of it built on a lie he had told so many times that he had started to believe it himself. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Hartwell, there's a process server in the lobby." Bradley closed his eyes. "Send them up." 5 minutes later, he was holding another stack of papers. This time, it wasn't from Denise's lawyers. It was from the SEC. They were opening a formal investigation into securities fraud. Bradley read the first paragraph 3 times before the words made sense. Misrepresentation of intellectual property ownership in IPO filings. Potential violation of Section 10B. Criminal referral pending. Criminal. The word sat in his chest like a stone. He could go to prison. Bradley Hartwell III, heir to old money, graduate of Dartmouth, self-proclaimed visionary genius, could actually go to prison. He threw the glass against the wall. It shattered into 1,000 pieces. Scotch dripped down the expensive wallpaper. He didn't feel better. He felt nothing. Across the city, Marcus Bishop's conference room was buzzing with activity. 3 paralegals were organizing documents. 2 forensic accountants were reviewing financial records. A junior associate was fielding calls from media outlets. In the middle of it all sat Denise Washington, calm as a surgeon. "The SEC investigation is official," Marcus announced, walking in with a stack of papers. "They're going after him for the IPO filings. If they can prove he knowingly misrepresented ownership, he's looking at 5 to 10 years. "Good," Denise said quietly. Marcus sat down across from her. "Denise, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me."
I'm always honest with you, Marcus. Do you want him to go to prison?
Denise was quiet for a long moment. "I want the truth to matter," she said finally. "I want the world to know what he did. I want my son to know who his mother really is. I want every woman who has ever been erased by a man like Bradley to see that erasure doesn't have to be permanent. That's not what I asked." Denise looked at her old mentor. Her eyes were tired but clear. "No, Marcus, I don't want him to go to prison. I want him to live with this. I want him to wake up every morning and know that everyone sees through him now. I want him to walk down the street and have people whisper. I want him to spend the rest of his life being exactly what he always accused me of being. Which is nobody." Marcus nodded slowly. "Then we have a decision to make. His lawyers called this morning. They want to settle." Denise's expression didn't change.
What are they offering? 50-50 split of marital assets. Bradley keeps the CEO title and the company name. You get half the stock value once it recovers, plus the Hamptons estate.
"No. It's a significant offer, Denise. Even with the stock crash, we're talking about $300 million. I said no." Marcus leaned forward. "Talk to me. What do you want?" Denise stood up. She walked to the window. The city stretched out below her, gray and indifferent. "I want the company," she said. "The whole company?" "The whole company. I want my name on the building. I want to sit in the chair he sat in. I want to look at the board that ignored me for 20 years and tell them I'm their boss now." "That's going to be a fight." Denise turned back to face him. "I've been fighting for 20 years, Marcus. I'm just finally fighting where people can see me." The second day of the trial began with a surprise.
Bradley Hartwell walked into the courtroom looking like a different man. His suit was rumpled, his tie was crooked. He hadn't shaved, and gray stubble covered his jaw. But it was his eyes that told the real story. The arrogance was gone. The confidence was gone. What remained was something hollow and desperate. Tiffany's seat in the front row was empty. Her Instagram account had been deleted overnight. Rumors were already circulating that she had been spotted at JFK, boarding a flight to Dubai. Judge Caldwell took her seat and surveyed the room. "Before we proceed, I understand there's a motion from the petitioner's counsel." Preston Whitmore stood. He looked almost as bad as his client. "Your Honor, in light of recent developments, my client wishes to request a recess to explore settlement options with the respondent." "Settlement?" Judge Caldwell raised an eyebrow. "Yesterday, your client was demanding 100% of the company. Today, he wants to settle? Circumstances have changed, Your Honor. I'll say they have." The judge turned to Marcus. "Mr. Bishop?" Marcus glanced at Denise. She gave a small nod. "We're willing to hear their offer, Your Honor, but we'd like to proceed with today's testimony first." Judge Caldwell nodded. "Very well. Mr. Bishop, call your next witness." The respondent calls Julian Miles Hartwell Washington. A murmur went through the gallery. Bradley's head snapped up. "No!" His son walked through the doors. Julian was 19 years old, tall and handsome, with his mother's intelligent eyes and his father's strong jaw. He wore a simple navy suit. No flash, no pretense. He didn't look at his father as he walked to the witness stand. "Julian!" Bradley's voice cracked. "Julian! Please!" Julian kept walking. He took the oath. He sat down.
Marcus approached gently. Mr. Washington Hartwell, thank you for being here today. I know this isn't easy.
It's necessary, Julian said quietly. Can you tell the court about your relationship with your parents? Julian took a breath. I love both my parents. I want to be clear about that. But I've watched something happen over the past 20 years that I didn't fully understand until recently.
What did you watch?
I watched my father take credit for everything, every success, every innovation, every achievement. And I watched my mother disappear.
Disappear how?
Julian's voice tightened. My mother is the smartest person I've ever known. She has 3 degrees. She can explain quantum computing to a child and make it sound like a fairy tale. But my whole life, my father told me she was just a housewife. He told me she didn't understand business. He told me she wasn't built for the corporate world.
Did you believe him?
I was a kid. Of course I believed him. I believed my dad was a genius and my mom was just there. Support staff, background noise.
Julian looked at his mother for the first time. Denise's eyes were wet.
When did that change? Marcus asked. When I was 16, I found some old files on my mom's computer. Code, patents, business plans, stuff dated from before I was born. I asked her about it, and she just changed the subject. She said it was old work, nothing important.
Did you believe her?
No, but I didn't push. I should have pushed. What happened recently that made you decide to testify? Julian turned to look at his father. For the first time, their eyes met. Bradley looked away. My father told me my mother was nothing, Julian said, his voice hardening. He told me she contributed nothing to our family. He told me she was just dead weight he was finally cutting loose. And then he tried to give her a broken-down cottage and pocket change while he kept everything she built.
How did that make you feel?
Angry, sick, ashamed. Julian's voice cracked. Ashamed that I ever believed him. Ashamed that I let him treat her that way. Ashamed that I didn't see what was right in front of me.
What do you see now?
Julian looked at his mother. His eyes were filled with tears. I see a woman who gave up everything for her family, who wrote code until 4 in the morning while her husband slept, who let him take credit because she thought that's what love meant, who raised me to be kind and honest and hardworking, while he taught me that success meant stepping on people. He turned back to Marcus. I see my mother, the real architect of everything my father claims to own. The gallery was silent. Bradley buried his face in his hands. No further questions, Marcus said softly. Preston Whitmore stood slowly. He looked defeated before he even opened his mouth. Mr. Washington Hartwell, isn't it true that you've been estranged from your father recently? We've had disagreements.
So this testimony could be motivated by personal animosity?
Julian's expression hardened. I'm here because my mother deserves the truth. I'm here because my father lied under oath. I'm here because I spent my whole life believing a story that was written to erase the person who loved me most. But you can't personally verify that your mother wrote the code, can you? I can verify that my father doesn't know the difference between Python and a python. I can verify that every time I asked him a technical question, he changed the subject. I can verify that when I showed him my computer science homework, he couldn't understand it. Preston opened his mouth to respond, but Julian wasn't finished. And I can verify that my mother helped me with that homework. Every night, for years. She taught me to code. She taught me to think. She taught me everything my father claims to know, but doesn't. Preston sat down. He had nothing else. Judge Caldwell called for a recess. Bradley tried to approach Julian as the room cleared. Son, Julian, please, let me explain. Julian stopped. He turned slowly. Explain what, Dad? Explain how you convinced the world that Mom was worthless? Explain how you tried to leave her with nothing after she gave you everything? Explain how you've been lying to me my entire life? I didn't lie. I streamlined the narrative. Julian laughed bitterly. Streamline the narrative. That's what you call it? You erased her, Dad. You made her invisible. You made me think she was nothing. I never meant— What did you mean? Did you mean to cheat on her with a woman half her age? Did you mean to parade Tiffany around like Mom didn't exist? Did you mean to offer her a broken cottage while you kept $1 billion? Bradley's face crumpled. Julian, please, I'm still your father. Yeah, Julian's voice was cold. You are, and I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life. He walked away. Bradley stood alone. The settlement conference happened in a small room with no windows. Bradley sat on one side of the table. Denise sat on the other. Their lawyers flanked them like seconds at a duel. Let's be clear about the situation, Marcus began. My client owns the intellectual property that Hartwell Technologies is built on. She owns the original LLC that held those patents. Your client has been using her property without authorization for 20 years. We're prepared to make a generous offer, Preston said wearily. We're not interested in generous. We're interested in fair. What do you want? Marcus slid a document across the table. Preston read it. His face went pale. He showed it to Bradley. Bradley's hands started shaking. This is insane, Bradley whispered. You want everything. I want what's mine, Denise said quietly. It was the first time she had spoken. You can't do this. The shareholders, the board, they'll never accept it. The shareholders are already suing you for fraud. The board is looking for any way to save the company. They'll accept new leadership, especially leadership that actually knows how the technology works. Bradley stared at her. You would really take it all? After everything we built together? Denise's eyes flashed. Together? You just spent 2 days in court telling everyone I did nothing. You told the world I couldn't program a microwave. You tried to erase me completely. I was angry. I was scared. I didn't mean— You meant every word, Bradley. You've meant every word for 20 years. Every time you interrupted me, every time you talked over me, every time you smiled for the cameras while I stood in the shadows. You meant it. Bradley's voice dropped. So this is revenge? No. Denise's voice was steady. This is correction. The world had the story wrong. I'm fixing it. And what about me? What am I supposed to do? Denise looked at the man she had married, the man she had loved, the man who had slowly, methodically erased her from her own life. You keep the penthouse. You keep the cars. You get $5 million severance. $5 million? I was worth $1 billion. You were worth what I built. Without the algorithm, without the patents, without the original company structure, you're worth exactly what you brought to our marriage. Bradley's face contorted. What was that? A dream, Denise said softly. A big, loud, beautiful dream. And I loved you for it once. I loved that you could see something bigger than where we were. I just didn't realize that your dream didn't include me. Denise. Sign the papers, Bradley. Take the $5 million. Walk away. Because if we go back into that courtroom, I won't stop until you have nothing. Bradley looked at the document. His hand hovered over the signature line. I did love you, he said quietly. "In the beginning, I did." "I know." Denise's voice was sad. "But you loved being Bradley Hartwell more." Bradley closed his eyes. He signed. He pushed the paper back across the table. And just like that, 20 years of marriage ended with the scratch of a pen. Denise stood up. "Goodbye, Bradley." She walked out without looking back. Bradley sat alone in the conference room. His lawyer started gathering papers. "What happens now?" Bradley asked, his voice hollow. "Now? You walk away. You keep a roof over your head and more money than most people see in a lifetime. You should consider yourself lucky." "Lucky?" "She could have destroyed you, Bradley, completely. She had enough evidence to put you in prison. She chose not to." Bradley stared at the door Denise had walked through. "Why?" Preston shook his head. "I don't know. Maybe she's more merciful than you deserved. Maybe she didn't want to drag Julian through a criminal trial. Or maybe..." "Maybe what?" "Maybe she just wanted you to see her, Bradley. Really see her. For once in your damn life." Preston packed up his briefcase and left. Bradley sat alone. For the first time in 20 years, he thought about the woman he had married. Not the housewife he had dismissed. Not the background noise he had ignored. Not the obstacle between him and Tiffany. The woman who had stayed up until dawn writing code while he slept. The woman who had given up her career so he could build his. The woman who had raised their son to be everything Bradley wasn't. The woman he had thrown away like trash. Bradley buried his face in his hands and wept. Outside, Denise walked into the afternoon sun. Marcus fell into step beside her. "You did it," he said quietly. "You actually did it." "We're not done yet." "What do you mean?" Denise stopped. She looked up at the sky. "I don't just want the company, Marcus. I want to build something new. Something that doesn't have his fingerprints all over it." "What are you thinking?" "A complete rebrand. New name, new leadership, new mission. I want to create opportunities for every woman who was ever told she was just support staff. Every engineer who got talked over in meetings. Every genius who was made to feel small." Marcus smiled. "Sounds expensive. Good thing I just became a billionaire." Denise started walking again. The city stretched out before her. For 20 years, she had been invisible. Now the whole world was about to see what invisible could do. 3 months changed everything. The settlement was finalized in early January. By February, Denise Washington had walked into the headquarters of what used to be Hartwell Technologies and fired half the executive team. The ones who stayed were the ones who actually worked. The engineers, the developers, the project managers who had been grinding in the background while Bradley smiled for cameras. The ones who left were the sycophants, the yes men, the executives who had made careers out of agreeing with whatever Bradley said. They didn't go quietly. "This is a hostile takeover," Richard Brennan shouted during the emergency board meeting. He was the former CFO, a man who had spent 15 years kissing Bradley's feet. "She doesn't have the experience to run a company this size." Denise sat at the head of the table, the seat Bradley used to occupy. "Mr. Brennan, I wrote the algorithm that makes this company worth anything. I designed the system architecture. I hold the patents. What exactly is your contribution?" Brennan's face turned red. "I managed the finances. I handled the IPO." "You managed finances based on fraudulent ownership claims. You handled an IPO that is now under SEC investigation." Denise's voice was calm, almost gentle. "Your resignation is effective immediately. Security will escort you out." "You can't do this." "I just did."
Brennan looked around the table for support. The other board members looked away. "This company will collapse without experienced leadership," Brennan sputtered. "Mr. Brennan, this company has been running on my code for 20 years. The only thing collapsing is your career." She pressed a button on the conference phone. "Send in security." 2 guards appeared at the door. Brennan grabbed his briefcase. His hands were shaking with rage. "You'll regret this," he hissed at Denise. "Bradley was right about you. You're nothing but a—" "Careful," Marcus Bishop said from his seat beside Denise. "Whatever you say next could be considered slander. And given your involvement in the SEC investigation, I wouldn't recommend adding a defamation lawsuit to your problems." Brennan's mouth snapped shut. He stormed out. The door closed behind him. Denise looked at the remaining board members. "Anyone else have concerns?" Silence. "Good. Let's talk about the future." The rebrand happened faster than anyone expected. By March, the signs on the building had changed. The logo had changed. The mission statement had changed. Hartwell Technologies was dead. In its place stood Washington Dynamics. The press conference was held on a Tuesday morning. Denise stood behind a podium, wearing a simple black dress and her grandmother's pearl earrings. No flash, no pretense, just truth. 20 years ago, I wrote the code that became the backbone of a billion-dollar company, she said, her voice carrying through the packed room. For 20 years, someone else took credit for that work. For 20 years, I was invisible. She paused. Let the words settle. Today that changes. Washington Dynamics is not just a new name. It's a new beginning. We are committing $50 million to scholarships for women in STEM. We are launching a mentorship program for underrepresented engineers. We are building a company where talent matters more than titles. A reporter raised her hand. "Dr. Washington, what do you say to critics who claim you're trying to erase your ex-husband's legacy?" Denise smiled. It was a sad, knowing smile. You can't erase something that didn't exist. Bradley Hartwell was the face of this company. But faces don't build algorithms. Faces don't file patents. Faces don't stay up until 4 a.m. solving problems that have never been solved before. She looked directly into the camera. "I was never trying to erase Bradley's legacy. I was trying to reclaim my own." The questions continued for another hour. Denise answered every one with patience and precision. By the end of the day, Washington Dynamics stock had risen 12%. By the end of the week, it had recovered to $48 a share. By the end of the month, it was trading higher than it ever had under Bradley's leadership. The world was watching, and for the first time in 20 years, they were watching her. Julian came to visit on a Saturday afternoon. Denise was in her new office, reviewing engineering reports. The office was different now. No ego wall of magazine covers, no awards that belonged to someone else. Just whiteboards covered in code. Photos of Julian at various ages. A small framed picture of her parents on her desk. "Mom." She looked up, smiled. "Hey, baby, how's New Haven?" "Cold." Julian sat down across from her. "You look tired." "I am tired. Running a company is harder than I remembered." "You're loving every second of it." Denise laughed. "Maybe." Julian was quiet for a moment. He fidgeted with his watch, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. "What is it?" Denise asked. "I saw Dad yesterday." Denise's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. "How is he?" "Not good. He sold the penthouse, said the maintenance fees were too high, but I think he just couldn't afford it anymore. He's living in Jersey City now. Small apartment, 2 bedrooms. Is he okay?" Julian shrugged. "Define okay."
He's not drinking himself to death. He's not homeless, but he's different, smaller, like someone let all the air out of him. Denise was quiet. "He asked about you," Julian continued. "What did he say?" "He asked if you were happy, and he said he was sorry." "Did he mean it?" Julian considered the question. "I think he did. For the first time in my life, I think he actually meant it." Denise turned to look out the window. The city spread below, endless and indifferent. "I don't hate him, Julian. I want you to know that. I'm angry. I'm hurt. I spent 20 years being treated like furniture. But I don't hate him." "Then why did you take everything?" Denise turned back to her son. "I didn't take everything. I took what was mine. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes." Denise's voice was firm but gentle. "Your father tried to erase me, not just from the company, from our history, from your memory. He wanted the world to believe I was nothing, that I contributed nothing, that I deserved nothing." "I know. I took the company because it was built on my work. I took the patents because I filed them. I took the leadership because I earned it. But I left him with $5 million and a roof over his head. I could have left him with nothing." "Why didn't you?" Denise was quiet for a long moment. "Because I remember who he used to be," she said finally. "Before the money, before the fame, before he started believing his own lies. I remember the boy who made me laugh in that basement apartment, the boy who had big dreams and no idea how to make them real. The boy I fell in love with." "Do you still love him?" "No, but I remember loving him, and that memory deserves some mercy." Julian nodded slowly. "He wants to see you," he said quietly. "He didn't ask me to tell you that, but I could see it in his eyes." Denise shook her head. "I'm not ready for that, Julian. Maybe I never will be." "I understand." He stood up to leave. Then he stopped. "Mom?" "Yes?" "I'm proud of you. Not because you won, but because you did it without becoming him." Denise felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you, baby." Julian left. Denise sat alone in her office. She picked up the photo of her parents, her father in his mechanic's uniform, her mother in her nurse's scrubs, both of them smiling like they had won the lottery. They had never had much money, but they had given her everything that mattered. "I did it, Daddy," she whispered. "I didn't let anybody write me out of my story." She put the photo down. She went back to work. The SEC investigation concluded in April. Bradley Hartwell was not charged with criminal fraud. The evidence was damning, but his lawyers argued that he genuinely believed he owned the intellectual property. Ignorance, it turned out, was an effective legal defense when you had enough money for good attorneys. He was, however, barred from serving as an officer or director of any public company for 10 years. His remaining shares in what used to be Hartwell Technologies were seized to pay fines and legal fees. What was left of his $5 million dwindled to less than $2. The business magazines that had once celebrated him now wrote postmortems. The Fall of Bradley Hartwell, How Ego Destroyed an Empire. The Visionary Who Wasn't, Inside the Hartwell Fraud. She built it, he claimed it. The true story of Washington dynamics. Bradley read every article. He kept them in a folder on his laptop, like a man picking at a wound that wouldn't heal. The world had moved on, but he couldn't. Every morning, he woke up in his small apartment and stared at the ceiling. He made coffee that tasted like nothing. He watched financial news until seeing Denise's face became too painful.
She was everywhere now. Magazine covers, television interviews, TED Talks. The world had fallen in love with her story. The quiet genius who had been erased and then wrote herself back in. The woman who had waited 20 years and then took back everything. Bradley should have hated her. Sometimes he tried to, but mostly, he just felt empty. One morning in May, his phone rang. He didn't recognize the number. Hello? Mr. Hartwell? This is Dr. Patricia Okonkwo from Columbia Presbyterian. You're listed as the emergency contact for Tiffany McAllister. Bradley's stomach dropped. Tiffany? I haven't spoken to her in months. Sir, Miss McAllister was brought in this morning. She's been in an accident. She's asking for you. Bradley closed his eyes. He should hang up. He should pretend he never got this call. Tiffany had abandoned him the moment the money disappeared. She didn't deserve his attention. But something in him couldn't say no. I'll be there in an hour. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and desperation. Bradley found Tiffany in a private room on the 4th floor. She was smaller than he remembered, paler. Her perfect blonde hair was matted and unwashed. Her arm was in a cast. Bruises covered her face. Bradley. Her voice was weak, broken. He sat down in the chair beside her bed. What happened? I was with someone, a man I met in Dubai. He was rich, really rich, but he... She trailed off. Tears streamed down her cheeks. He hurt you. Tiffany nodded. I tried to leave. He didn't want me to leave. Bradley felt something cold move through him. Anger. Not at Tiffany, at the man who had done this. Why did you call me? He asked. You disappeared. You blocked my number. You walked out of my life without a word. Tiffany laughed bitterly. It turned into a cough. Because you're the only person who might still answer. My family disowned me years ago. My friends all disappeared when the money did. I have nobody, Bradley. Nobody. You had me. You left. I know. Tiffany's eyes met his. For the first time, he saw something real there. Not calculation, not ambition, just pain. I'm sorry, she whispered. I was so focused on the lifestyle that I forgot you were a person. I forgot you had feelings. I forgot that money isn't everything. Did you ever love me? Bradley asked quietly. Tiffany was silent for a long moment. I wanted to, she said finally. I really wanted to. But I didn't know how. I don't think I've ever known how to love anything except what love could get me. Bradley looked at this woman he had thrown his marriage away for. This woman he had paraded in front of his wife. This woman he had thought was his reward for success. She was just as broken as he was, maybe more. What are you going to do now? He asked. I don't know. I have nothing. The man in Dubai, he controlled everything. My bank accounts, my passport. I had to beg a nurse to let me use her phone to call you. Bradley thought about his own situation. $2 million, a small apartment, no career, no future. But he was alive. He was free. He had a son who still talked to him. He had more than she did. I can help you get back on your feet, he heard himself say. Not much. I don't have much left. But I can help you find a place, get you some clothes, help you figure out what's next. Tiffany stared at him. Why would you do that? After everything I did? Bradley stood up. He walked to the window. The city spread out below, cold and indifferent. Because I spent 20 years taking things from people who loved me, he said quietly. Maybe it's time I started giving something back. Tiffany started crying again. But this time, it wasn't from pain. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, Bradley." He didn't respond. He just watched the city and wondered if this was what redemption felt like. Word got back to Denise. Marcus told her during their weekly meeting. Bradley is helping Tiffany recover. Apparently, she was in some kind of abusive situation overseas. He's been visiting her at the hospital every day. Denise set down her coffee cup. That's unexpected. People change. Do they? Marcus shrugged. Sometimes. When they lose everything, they either become worse or better. There's rarely a middle ground. Denise thought about Bradley, the boy she had married, the man he had become, the stranger he was now. Does it matter? She asked finally. What he does with his life now? Only if you let it. Denise shook her head. I don't have room for him anymore, Marcus. Not anger, not pity, not curiosity. I spent 20 years carrying the weight of that marriage. I'm done. Then let's talk about something else. Marcus slid a folder across the table. Forbes wants you for their cover next month. The Quiet Architect, How Denise Washington Reclaimed a Billion-Dollar Empire. Denise laughed. Quiet Architect. I like that. They're calling you an inspiration, a role model. Women all over the country are citing your story as motivation. Good. That's the point, isn't it? To show people that being erased doesn't have to be permanent. Is that the only point? Denise looked at her old mentor. What do you mean? I mean, you won, Denise. Completely. You have the company, you have the money, you have the recognition. But are you happy? The question hung in the air. Denise was quiet for a long moment. I don't know if happy is the right word, she said finally. I feel real. For the first time in 20 years, I feel like myself. Not somebody's wife, not somebody's support staff, not somebody's background noise. Just me. And is that enough? Denise smiled. It was a real smile, the kind she hadn't allowed herself in years. It's more than enough. It's everything. Her phone buzzed. A text from Julian. Mom, Dad asked if he could write you a letter. He knows you don't want to see him, but he wants to apologize properly. Can I give him your address? Denise stared at the message. Her first instinct was to say no, to keep that door locked forever. But something stopped her. Maybe it was closure. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the woman she used to be, the one who had loved Bradley before he became someone she couldn't recognize. She typed her response slowly. He can write. I don't promise I'll read it. She put the phone down. Marcus raised an eyebrow. What was that? The past trying to catch up with me. Are you going to let it? Denise looked out the window. The city stretched below, full of millions of stories, millions of people fighting to be seen. I'll let it knock, she said quietly. But I decide whether to open the door. The letter arrived a week later. Denise didn't open it right away. She left it on her desk for 3 days. She walked past it every morning, every evening, every time she reached for her coffee. Finally, on a Sunday afternoon, when the office was empty, she sat down and tore open the envelope. Bradley's handwriting was shakier than she remembered, less confident. The letters slanted slightly, like they were tired. Denise, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I need you to know some things, even if you throw this letter away after the first line. I was wrong. About everything. About you. About us. About who built what we had. I spent 20 years telling myself a story A story where I was the hero, the genius, the visionary. I told it so many times that I forgot it was a lie. I forgot that every late night, every breakthrough, every line of code came from you. I forgot because I wanted to forget, because admitting the truth meant admitting that without you, I was nothing. You deserved better. You deserved a partner who saw you, who celebrated you, who stood next to you instead of in front of you. Instead, you got me, a man so consumed by his own reflection that he couldn't see the sun. I'm not writing this to get you back. I know that's impossible. I'm not writing to make excuses. There are none. I'm writing because Julian is right. You deserve to hear this from me, not through lawyers, not through newspapers, from me. You were never invisible, Denise. I just closed my eyes. And now that I can finally see, all I see is everything I lost. I'm sorry. Bradley. Denise read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and put it in her desk drawer. She didn't cry. She had no more tears for Bradley Hartwell. But she did feel something shift inside her. Something that had been tight for 20 years, finally loosening. Not forgiveness, not yet. Maybe not ever. But something close to peace. 6 months after the settlement, Denise Washington stood on a stage in front of 3,000 people. The National Women in Technology Conference had sold out in 48 hours. Every seat filled, standing room only. Camera crews from every major network lined the back of the auditorium. They had all come to hear her speak. Denise gripped the podium. Her grandmother's pearl earrings caught the light. Her heart was pounding, but her voice was steady. 20 years ago, I wrote an algorithm in a basement apartment in Queens, she began. I was 27 years old. I had a PhD from Stanford. I had more talent than I knew what to do with. And I had a husband who told me the world wasn't ready for women like me. The audience was silent. 3,000 people holding their breath. So I stepped back. I let him take the credit. I told myself that supporting his dream was the same as living my own. I told myself that love meant sacrifice, that being a good wife meant being invisible. She paused, let the words settle. I was wrong. A murmur rippled through the crowd. For 20 years, I watched someone else take credit for my work. For 20 years, I smiled for cameras while standing in the background. For 20 years, I answered to a name that wasn't mine and lived a life that didn't fit. Her voice grew stronger. And then one day I woke up. Not because I suddenly became brave, not because I had some magical epiphany. I woke up because the man I had given everything to looked me in the eye and told me I was worthless. He told me I had contributed nothing. He told me I was dead weight. She laughed softly. The sound echoed through the auditorium. Dead weight. Me. The woman who wrote the code. The woman who filed the patents. The woman who built the foundation his entire empire stood on. She looked out at the crowd. Thousands of faces looking back at her. Young women. Old women. Women who had been invisible. Women who were fighting to be seen. So I did something I should have done 20 years ago. I stopped being invisible. I stopped being quiet. I stopped waiting for someone to give me permission to exist. She leaned into the microphone. I took back my name. I took back my company. I took back my story. The applause started slowly. 1 person, then 10, then 100. Then the entire auditorium was on its feet, cheering, crying, screaming. Denise stood at the podium and let the sound wash over her. For 20 years, she had been silent. Now the whole world was listening. After the speech, she was swarmed. Journalists, business executives, young women who wanted selfies, old women who wanted to shake her hand. Dr. Washington, how does it feel to be named one of Time's most influential people? Dr. Washington, what advice do you have for women in male-dominated industries? Dr. Washington, are you planning to write a book? Denise answered every question with patience. She posed for every photo. She shook every hand. But inside, she was somewhere else. She was thinking about the letter in her desk drawer.
The letter she had read 100 times but never responded to. She was thinking about Bradley. Not the man who had betrayed her. Not the man who had tried to erase her. But the boy she had married. The boy who used to make her laugh. The boy who had looked at her like she was the most brilliant person in the world. That boy was gone. She knew that. He had been gone for years, maybe decades. But sometimes, late at night, she still missed him. Dr. Washington? Denise blinked. A young woman stood in front of her, early 20s, dark skin, natural hair, wearing a conference lanyard and clutching a notebook like it was a lifeline. "I'm sorry to bother you," the young woman said. Her voice was shaking. "I just wanted to say thank you." "For what?" "For everything. For proving that women like me can win. For showing us that being quiet doesn't mean being weak. For—" She trailed off. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. Denise reached out and took the young woman's hand. "What's your name?" "Amara. Amara Johnson." "Amara. What do you do?" "I'm an engineer, software. I work at a startup in Atlanta. My boss takes credit for everything I do. He tells everyone I'm just his assistant. But I've been building the whole platform, alone, for 3 years." Denise squeezed her hand. "Do you have documentation?" Amara nodded. "I keep copies of everything, code commits, design documents, email chains. I learned that from reading about your case." "Good girl." Denise reached into her pocket and pulled out a business card. "Call this number tomorrow. Ask for Marcus Bishop. Tell him I sent you. Tell him your story." Amara stared at the card like it was made of gold. "I can't afford a lawyer like that." "You won't have to. I'll cover it." "Dr. Washington, I can't let you—" "Amara." Denise's voice was firm but gentle. 20 years ago, I was you. I was brilliant and invisible and convinced that being good at my job would be enough. It wasn't enough. It's never enough. You have to fight. And you can't fight alone. Amara started crying again. But this time, the tears were different. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." Denise pulled her into a hug. "Go change the world, baby girl. And don't let anybody write you out of your own story." Amara walked away, clutching the business card like a talisman. Denise watched her go. "This is why," she thought. "This is why I fought. Not for the money. Not for the revenge. For every Amara, in every basement apartment, in every city in the world. For every brilliant woman who has been told she's just support staff. For every invisible genius who deserves to be seen." Julian graduated from Yale in May. Denise sat in the front row, watching her son walk across the stage. Magna cum laude, economics degree, a job offer from Goldman Sachs that he had already turned down because he wanted to work in social enterprise instead. "I don't want to be rich," he had told her. "I want to be useful." She had never been more proud. After the ceremony, Julian found her in the crowd. He was still wearing his cap and gown, grinning like the little boy she remembered. "Mom, you came!" "Of course I came. You think I would miss this?" He hugged her tight. "I know you're busy. The company, the foundation, the speeches. You're everywhere now. I'm never too busy for you, Julian. Never." They walked together across the campus. Other graduates rushed past, taking photos, hugging parents, celebrating. "Dad wanted to come," Julian said quietly.
Denise's step faltered slightly. Did he? He asked me if it would be okay. I said I needed to ask you first. Denise was quiet for a long moment. What do you want? She asked finally. Julian stopped walking. He turned to face her. I want both my parents at my graduation. I want to stop feeling like I have to choose. I want us to be a family again, even if it's a broken family.
Even if it's just 3 people who share history and nothing else.
Denise looked at her son, the boy who had inherited her eyes and Bradley's stubbornness. The young man who had stood up in court and told the truth, even when it cost him. Is he here? She asked. Julian nodded. He's waiting by the library. He didn't want to ambush you. He said he'd leave if you wanted him to. Denise took a deep breath. 20 years of pain. 20 years of erasure. 20 years of being invisible. And one letter that she had read 100 times. Take me to him, she said. Bradley was sitting on a bench outside Sterling Memorial Library. He looked older than she remembered, thinner. His hair was completely gray now. He was wearing a simple blazer and khakis. No designer labels, no flash. He stood up when he saw her approaching. Denise. His voice was rough, uncertain. Bradley. They stood 5 feet apart. The distance felt like an ocean. Julian looked between them.
I'm going to go find my friends. Give you 2 a minute? He walked away before either of them could protest. Silence stretched between them. Bradley spoke first. Thank you for coming. I know you didn't have to. I did it for Julian, not for you. I know. He nodded slowly. I know. Another silence. You look good, Bradley said quietly. Strong. Happy. I am happy, for the first time in 20 years. I'm glad. I mean that. I'm glad you're happy. Denise studied his face, looking for the lie, looking for the manipulation, looking for the man who had tried to destroy her. She didn't find him. All she found was a tired man who had lost everything and was trying to figure out how to live with what remained. Did you read my letter? Bradley asked. Yes. And? Denise considered the question. I'm not ready to forgive you, she said slowly. I don't know if I ever will be. What you did, it wasn't just betrayal. It was erasure. You tried to make me disappear. You tried to convince the world I was nothing. I know. But I don't hate you anymore. The words surprised her even as she said them. I used to, for a long time. But hate takes energy, and I have better things to spend my energy on. Bradley's eyes glistened. That's more than I deserve. Probably. He laughed softly. It was a sad sound. I see you everywhere now, he said. Magazine covers, television interviews. You're changing the world, Denise. You're actually changing it. I'm trying. You're succeeding. He shook his head slowly. I spent 20 years pretending to be a visionary. You actually are one. Denise felt something shift inside her. A door that had been locked for years, finally unlocking. Bradley, can I ask you something? Anything. Did you ever see me? Really see me? Before everything went wrong? Bradley was quiet for a long moment. Yes, he said finally. In the beginning, when we were kids in that basement apartment. When you would stay up all night coding, and I would bring you coffee. I saw you then. I saw how brilliant you were. How special. I was terrified of it. Terrified? You were always going to be more than me, Denise. I knew it from the first day we met. And instead of celebrating that, I buried it. I made you small so I could feel big.
I convinced myself that your light was mine. He wiped his eyes. It was the worst thing I ever did, and I'll spend the rest of my life knowing it. Denise felt tears on her own cheeks. She hadn't expected that. Hadn't expected to feel anything but cold satisfaction. But this wasn't satisfaction. This was grief. Grief for the marriage they could have had, the partnership they could have built, the life they could have lived if Bradley had been brave enough to stand beside her instead of in front of her. "I loved you," she said quietly. "I really did." "I know. And I wasted it. I wasted every single day." They stood in silence, two people who had shared 20 years, and now shared nothing but regret. "What happens now?" Bradley asked. Denise wiped her eyes. "Now we move forward, separately. You live your life, I live mine. We show up for Julian when he needs us. We try to be civil. Is that all we can have?" "It's more than I thought we would have. Take it." Bradley nodded slowly. "Okay, I can do that." He extended his hand. Denise looked at it. The hand that had signed the divorce papers. The hand that had tried to take everything from her. She shook it. "Goodbye, Bradley." "Goodbye, Denise." She walked away. She didn't look back. 1 year later, Forbes ran a cover story. The headline read, "The Quiet Architect: How Denise Washington Built a Billion-Dollar Empire in Plain Sight." The article told her story. The basement apartment, the algorithm, the erasure, the courtroom, the comeback. But it was the last paragraph that went viral. When asked what she wants her legacy to be, Washington doesn't hesitate. "I want every invisible woman to know that visibility is a choice," she says. Not society's choice, not your husband's choice, not your boss's choice. Yours. You can let them erase you, or you can pick up the pen and write yourself back in. Denise read the article in her office. Julian sat across from her, home for a visit. "Mom, you're famous." "I'm busy. Fame is just a side effect." Julian laughed. "You're on the cover of Forbes. That's not a side effect." Denise set down the magazine. "Do you know what I think about when I look at this?" she asked. "What?" "I think about your grandmother, my mother. She worked double shifts as a nurse for 30 years so I could have books. She never made the cover of anything. She never gave speeches. She never ran a company. But she raised me to believe I could. She told me every single day that I was smart and capable and worthy. She gave me the foundation everything else was built on." Denise picked up the framed photo on her desk. Her parents, smiling in their work uniforms. "She's the real architect, Julian. I just followed her blueprint." Julian was quiet for a moment. "She would be so proud of you, Mom." "I hope so. I hope she can see this wherever she is." The phone on Denise's desk buzzed. "Dr. Washington, your 2 o'clock is here. The investment committee for the new scholarship fund." Denise stood up. "Duty calls." Julian stood too. He hugged her tight. "I love you, Mom. I'm proud of you. And Grandma would be too." "I love you too, baby." She walked to the door. Then she stopped. "Julian?" "Yeah?" "Whatever you build with your life, build it with your own name on it. Don't let anyone else take credit. Don't let anyone else tell your story." "I won't, Mom. I learned from the best." Denise smiled. She walked out to change the world. Bradley Hartwell sat on a bench in Liberty State Park. The Manhattan skyline stretched across the water. Ferries cut back and forth. Tourists took photos. Life went on. He came here often now. It helped him think. A young woman sat down on the other end of the bench. She was reading a magazine. Bradley glanced over. Forbes. Denise's face on the cover. "She's incredible, isn't she?" the young woman said, noticing his stare. Bradley looked at the photo. His ex-wife's eyes. Strong. Confident. Alive. "Yes," he said quietly. "She always was." "I'm starting my own company," the young woman continued. "Tech. She's my inspiration. Did you see her speech at the Women in Technology conference?" "I did." "That part where she said she stopped waiting for permission to exist? I cried. I literally cried." Bradley nodded slowly. "She's the real deal," the young woman said. "Not like those fake entrepreneurs who take credit for other people's work. She actually built something." Bradley felt the words like a knife in his chest. But he deserved them. "She did," he agreed. "She built something amazing." The young woman stood up. "Nice talking to you. Have a good day." "You too." She walked away. Bradley sat alone, staring at the skyline. 20 years ago, he had stood on top of that city. He had thought he owned it. He had thought he was invincible. Now he was just another face in the crowd, another nobody watching from the sidelines. But Denise was up there, in those towers, in those boardrooms, in those magazine covers. She had always belonged there. He had just been too blind to see it. Bradley pulled out his phone. He opened the text thread with Julian. "Saw the Forbes cover. Tell your mother I'm proud of her. Tell her I always knew she was extraordinary, even when I pretended not to." He sent the message. He put the phone away. He watched the sun set over Manhattan. And for the first time in a long time, Bradley Hartwell felt something other than regret. He felt gratitude. Gratitude that the woman he had wronged had become everything she was meant to be. Gratitude that his son had her strength instead of his weakness. Gratitude that, even though he had lost everything, the world had gained something beautiful. He stood up. He walked home. Tomorrow, he would start volunteering at a coding boot camp for underprivileged kids. It was something he had been thinking about for months. A small way to give back. A small way to make amends. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was a start. The message reached Denise that evening. Julian had forwarded it without comment. She read it once, twice, 3 times. Then she typed a response, not to Bradley, to Julian. "Tell your father thank you, and tell him I hope he finds peace." She put down the phone. She looked out her office window. The city glittered below. Millions of lights, millions of stories, millions of people fighting to be seen. 20 years ago, she had been invisible. Today, she was a beacon. Not because she had won, not because she had money or fame or power, because she had refused to be erased. Because she had picked up the pen and written herself back into her own story. Because she had proven that the quiet ones are often the strongest, and that the foundation always matters more than the facade. Denise Washington smiled. She turned off the light. She went home. And somewhere in the city, in a small apartment in Jersey City, Bradley Hartwell looked at the same sky and finally understood what he had lost. Not money, not fame, not power. He had lost the chance to stand beside a star. But maybe, just maybe, watching her shine was enough. This is the story of how a woman who was told she was nothing became everything. This is the story of how silence became strength. This is the story of how the quiet architect finally got her name on the building.
And this is the truth that Bradley Hartwell learned too late. You cannot erase someone who writes in permanent ink.